Hello, and welcome to another episode of This Time Tomorrow, the podcast that brings together democracy defenders from around the world to see how we can win out against rising global autocracy. I'm Omri Price, and this time we have a slightly different format for you, a monologue, as we've been calling it, but that just means that I'll be talking for a bit. And I'll be talking about something that really matters to all of us in all of our lives, no matter who you are, where you are, and what you do. And that is time, one of the defining features of our experience of reality. So it's going to be a little bit metaphysical, shall we say, but it will also get very practical and quite political. And I'm sitting here in the last days, the last moments of 2025, reflecting on how we've gotten through this year with all of the craziness that has happened all over the world, and the major challenges that face humanity at large, Democrats, those who believe in democracy around the world, and in Europe, of course, and really recognizing that collectively we all need to step up our game and accelerate, do everything we need to do, bigger, faster, harder, and more. And that's just going to be, a make or break existential question for us all. So maybe before I dive into the meat and potatoes of this, I'll just carve out a small moment for a request. We have been doing this podcast, This Time Tomorrow, completely for free. It's really important for us to build up an audience, because the reason that we're doing this is to be able to create more of a media space for democratic voices, for democracy defenders, for those who strongly believe that liberal democracy, that social democracy, or whatever kind of democracy should go on to be stronger, better, and face down this autocratic challenge. And there's a huge amount at stake. This is about our freedom, about our security, about our well-being, about our prosperity, about our own future, about the future of our children. And what we see is across, especially digital media, but all kinds of media, the far right, the extremists, the autocrats are winning massively at reaching audiences across all media. And we, on the democratic side, need to have our own media channels, our own ways of getting the message out, our own ways of talking to each other and shaping ideas. And this kind of rallying and mobilizing and organizing is exactly why we set out this podcast. So we really need you to, wherever you're listening, click subscribe, click follow, whether you're on Spotify or on, whether you're eventually seeing us on YouTube. That will happen. Go to LinkedIn, which is where we're most active in terms of social media, and click follow there as well. Make sure that you subscribe to us wherever you can, also on Substack if you want, if you're there. And also, please take a quick moment to just, take the link on the platform that you use the most, whether it's, Spotify or LinkedIn or Apple podcasts or whatever, and just send that link through to a group of people on WhatsApp, on Signal. If you're still on Facebook, then on Facebook. And just send that through to people who you think would be interested. And maybe you can just commit to yourself to just send an individual message to just two people saying, hey, you might like this podcast. And even if you think it's a bit of a stretch, even if you think that person, will they like it, will they not, why not try it out? Anything we can do to kind of take this really off the ground is important. And this is a community effort. We really want to bring all of you along with us. And so we're going to make these sort of appeals a bit more regular on this podcast to try and really be calculated about increasing our audience numbers. And we encourage you all to support us and to do the same and to join a community. And if you start your own podcast along the similar lines, we'll support it too. So now to the topic at hand, which is time. Time is really the defining feature of our lives, right? It's the one finite resource that we all have and have to deal with. There's the space aspect of our lives. We inhabit the place where we are, and we travel in space, and our lives travel ever forward in time. It's the one thing that is certain about our lives, is that our time is finite. And that is something that all religions recognize, that spiritual practitioners recognize, scientists, etc. Even if you believe in an afterlife, if you believe in some kind of divine entity or divine providence, if you believe in reincarnation, whatever it is you believe, or if you're a total atheist and you believe just that this is what we have and this is it, which is also totally great. I mean, it's to each their own. Time being limited is the one thing that everyone seems to agree on, right? And if there's ever a resurrection of the dead, then the dead will come back, but the time they spent on Earth was still their time as living people. And how we manage that very finite resource of the time we have is crucially important in our personal lives, but it has also taken on an economic meaning these days, which is extremely important, and also in a societal and a political meaning, which is extremely important. So as we go through this exploration and reflection on time, we'll go from the existential, which is what we're talking about, the stuff that our existence is made of, through to the personal, in terms of how we each manage our time and deal with our time in our personal lives, through to what this means at a societal level, on the macro scale, and then that therefore also on a political level, and then also an existential level, which isn't existential in our own individual lives, but existential for us as societies, for us as a species. So, hold on to your seats here, or to your earphones or your speakers, and we'll go through it.
You stand on the side of the free world, or you stand on the side of those who fight against the free world. Who fight against the free world. And we are standing here on the side of the free world. This is a moment of truth.
The most important thing that a lot of spiritual disciplines, or also science, mindfulness, neurology, what they look at when you talk about time management is attention and focus, right? So if you've ever kind of heard of meditation, mindfulness, being in the now, the one way to really deal with your existential time management, the fact that you really have a finite amount of time, is to focus on the here and now. And the main element, the focus, is the focus, the fact that you can bring your mind to one place, be in the now. There is a famous book, The Power of Now, by a psychologist, talking about all of these things. And whether it's, neurology, looking at how your brain works and what actually, produces the most well-being, which focus and meditation tend to do that, studies have shown, or whether it's various yoga, Zen, chi, whatever it is, this element of being able to focus on the here and now is one of the most highly recommended in the human experience ways of managing your time. And that's where this element of well-being really clashes very intensively and head on with the economic time that we have in our current digital economy. What has been called surveillance capitalism. This big social media platform, big media platform existence, where essentially your attention span, your time, is monetized and is the main commodity that is being bought and sold. So if you look at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of these places, essentially your attention, that thing that is supposed to focus, um, is the commodity that Facebook, Meta, Google, etc., are offering to advertisers. And so advertisers are buying up, they're paying Meta and YouTube and all these other platforms in order to be able to access your attention, your focus, to essentially, whether you like it or not, you are on the plate as the product being sold by these platforms to advertisers. And if we go to the existential level, going back again, essentially your attention is all you have in this world, right? Your ability to focus your mind, your attention on a given thing at a given moment in time is essentially the essence, the quintessential lived experience that you have, right? And now this surveillance capitalism economic model is all about buying that up, taking up your personal focus, and that means that we are all perpetually distracted. This economy is based on commodifying distraction essentially the entire time. This is sort of like a sort of a mental masturbation that it has been scaled up to industrial or even beyond industrial levels, to a type of economy that just was simply not possible earlier on, with a lot of these algorithms that run these social media platforms designed to be addictive, designed to manipulate your cognitive structures, designed essentially to hack your brains in order to keep you on the platform for as long as possible. So that is one very serious personal element that we have to deal with in terms of our time. But then that also has a massive societal impact and a societal context that we should really be paying attention to. Because while we're all distracted on this cognitive hacking that is taking place, there are major problems that we have to deal with, and challenges and threats to our very existence that are essentially going uncatered for and dealt with in a way that is very, very far from sufficient. So while we are being prodded by social media algorithms to talk about, immigration and who are these people that are coming here and are they eating dogs, or or like what is the latest outrage that someone like Donald Trump said, or having all of these distracting arguments in our politics because they run clicks. We are not dealing with major crises that are at our feet and in our faces, that we're dealing with far too slowly. Now obviously climate, global heating is one thing that is an obvious element which we're not dealing with quickly enough. These emerging technologies of ever accelerating AI is another element where we're not really having the proper public debate on how to deal with it, how to prepare for it, how to use AI effectively. What does it mean to be a human being in a society that's permeated by artificial intelligence? We're not really having that discussion in our politics in anywhere near the kind of meaningful way that we should. There are also other emerging technologies, quantum computing, which are just a million times faster than the ordinary computing that we have now, but that will obviously turbocharge, I should say, our tech as well. We're not having meaningful discussion about that. This, raging inequality where just, one or two or three people own as much stuff as, a vast percentage of the population in the world, not because, they are, not because they've done something in free market capitalism to deserve that, but because they've abused a lot of a dominant position in many ways, basically buying up more and more and more, not avoiding to pay certain taxes, exercising a lot of power and accumulating huge amounts of wealth, because essentially the system is broken. And if Adam Smith and some of these original advocates of classical capitalism were to see this today, they would say, well, this is completely broken. This is not capitalism as we described it. This is not the free market at all. This is an abuse of the market. It's a distraction of the market. That is something that we're not dealing with, and we need to do that urgently, because when these AI technologies come through, and quantum technology, all of these emerging technologies, if all of those are owned by just a very, very small handful of people, then the risk is compounded, that we're just not going to have any freedom or any democracy. And also this rising autocracy that we're seeing, Putin, the various autocracies, China, the autocracy rising in the US in the meantime, all of these things, if we don't get a handle on this, if we don't step up quickly enough to build up democratic resilience in the places that are still democratic, and if we don't act quickly enough to resist and to develop autonomy towards the autocratic pressures that are there, then we're just going to lose our freedom. We're going to have this blip of a time in human history where people had relative liberty, which is really a very, very short amount of time if you think about it. I mean, if you're being very generous, it's maybe 200 years of human history. But then if you look at who's actually free, it's only been a very short time since, all adult people could actually vote, where we actually gave all adults, men and women, people of different colors and ethnicities, their full rights in established democracies these days. That's only some decades. That's less than 100 years that's been the case. And if we want that sort of century of liberty to be a thing of the past in human history, then we can do that. That's another aspect of time, which maybe deserves a closer look later on. But all of these elements are very, very urgent crises that we need to deal with. So, looking at climate, looking at AI, looking at other emerging technologies, looking at raging, crazy inequalities, and looking at democratic resilience. All of these are urgent. These are not problems that are waiting for us to pay attention to them. And yet, our societal institutions are just, not really built for dealing with things anywhere near quickly enough to be able to deal with the level and the scale of the problems. So all of our institutions are sort of designed in a way that sort of assumes that the 1990s still exist and that we're all going to be living in the 1990s forever. So if you look at the way that major companies are operated, and the way that major public institutions work, the way that all of us kind of plan our time through the year. We have these quarterly cycles. We can compare between this quarter and the same quarter last year. We make these 5-year plans, 3-year plans, and so on. And we sort of assume that pretty much, what was true 3 years ago is going to be true today and will still be true in 3 years' time. So we can see all of these things burning around us. We can see fires, floods, wars. Literally, we can see democratic systems collapsing. We see, elections being manipulated in ways that they have not been manipulated before. We can see these emerging technologies transforming our societies. We can see the entire post-war, post-1945 world order, and it essentially come down crashing around our feet. But we somehow assume that, if I have a 3-year plan for my government ministry or for my EU budget or whatever, if I create a 7-year EU budget, then that, what is true next year will still be true in 5 years' time, which doesn't actually make any sense if you have the courage to open your eyes and really look at it. And we can see that to deal with any of these problems, whether it's defense, resilience, developing and building up and scaling up technologies, there are precedents in human history which make it, give us an example of how to really deal with this. So the one thing that is still somewhat within living memory, just on the very, very edge of living memory, is World War II. And although a lot of the people that were around then, they're not around now, some of the last remnants are there. There are still some survivors of participants, although they're very much on the way out. But most of us, who are at a certain age, will have known people who lived through the war, would have known people who lived through that time. Maybe our grandparents, maybe people around us who were older when we were growing up, and we have a sense still of how cataclysmic and how just massive amount of upheaval that time entailed. And just some numbers about the scale of the effort around the war and the time crunch that the economies went through to deal with this. So just to have a thought on this, in 1939, the U.S. Army, so just the Army, was 140,000 people, maybe 139,000 people. The U.S. military as a whole, so with the Marines and the Air Force and the Navy and all that, was around between 300,000-400,000 people in 1939. By 1945, the U.S. military, with all of these branches, was 16 million people. So going from 140,000 to 16 million people. That's a colossal exponential level of growth that is just incredible in just 6 years. And these numbers come from the U.S. World War II Museum. And there's also a historian called Tom Holland who's written about this quite extensively. And if I misquote a number, I apologize, but it's pretty much in this ballpark. So we really have an exponential acceleration. In a similar sense, in 1939, the U.S. built 18 tanks, so 18 tanks in the whole year of 1939. By 1944, so 5 years later, the U.S. was producing 60,000 tanks a year. Right? So just imagine that massive scale up. And if you look at, European leaders are talking about, Can we get 80 tanks, 80 tanks to Ukraine? Can we get 14 from here, 12 from there? I don't know if you remember all these debates that were going on. Can we get them, one plane here, 4 planes there? This kind of stuff, that just kind of boggles the mind in terms of the scale of the effort that's required versus the scale that is actually being exercised. So, what happened to the economies of the United States and the Allies in that short time span of 1939 to 1945 gives us a template and gives us an example of how to really deal with a massive effort, something that is existential and something that really needs to happen. And what happened to the US economy coming out of the Great Depression in the 1930s into World War II? The economy boomed because there was so much spending on war stuff, So, yes, it means that there weren't cars produced. They were not producing, trucks and consumer products and all of that. All of the economy in the UK, in the US, etc., was geared purely towards the war effort, but the economy boomed. And then coming out of that, basically, through some smart vision, low interest rates, being able to then gear the economy back towards consumer markets, scaling down military effort, you still had an economic boom. So it's not like what some economists expected after the war was that the US economy would go back into depression, but that didn't actually happen because a lot of people came back from the war. There were a lot of new things to build. A lot of productivity had been gained. A lot of people went to work. Interest rates remained low, providing easy access to finance. And the economy grew. So nowadays, where you have economists saying, "Ooh, well, because we're going to need to spend more on defense, we're going to have less money for other things," la la la. That's not necessarily true. That's simply categorically not the experience of history. So we need to challenge some of those assumptions, and we need to change the way our institutions work to make sure that we really, really take up these challenges. So develop an infrastructure to build AI that is humane and that works. Put mechanisms in place to make sure that taxes are actually being paid in a fair way. So we have 26 trillion euros approximately of unpaid tax that's kind of sitting there in the ocean somewhere, and about 260,000 billion euros a year that are paid by Europeans to, the big tech platforms. And we just need to take action in a courageous way to change those economic streams. We need to actually have a functioning European army, because right now Europe spends a huge amount on defense and gets, practically zero return on investment because it has zero autonomous deployment capability. We need to actually invest trillions in green, sustainable economics and sustainable infrastructure. And that needs to be done quickly. It cannot be done in these long-term, by 2050, blah, 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 blah. 2050 is decades away still. And we're going to be, in a completely different place then than we are now. And we need to accelerate. And this is really existential. And here we go back from, a societal view of the economy and of time back to an existential view. Like, if we pretend like we can just stretch reality to fit our, sclerotic and very lethargic timelines, we're just kidding ourselves, and we're going to go off a cliff like a bunch of lemmings. We're going to lose our liberty. We're going to experience ever greater, floods, fires, droughts, and mass migration and economic destruction. And we're just not going to be around to deal with this. And we are now getting to experience more or less what 1.5 degree heating looks like. It's not going to get better, and if we get to 2 degrees, it's going to be that much worse. And like the butterfly effect, you don't know what the economic and political impacts of X flood and X fires are going to have. So it's definitely not going to add to our political stability and our ability to do this. We need to move a lot faster. And this is existential. So we've had existential time on an individual level in terms of how do I spend my life, and now we have existential time on a societal level, on a macro level. If we don't deal with this in time, if we don't use our societal time, our political time, our economic time in a much, much more effective way, then we're just not going to be around to tell the tale. Or if we are around, it's going to be in some kind of like tech serfdom, a tech colonized slavery, where some people are going to be fine, and a handful of people will own a lot and live in absolute luxury, protected from the the disaster that will be climate change. But most of us are probably gonna live like shit if we don't do anything. And this is not something for future generations. This is not about some long-term future. This is us now. So if you are, under 80 years old now, this affects you right now. Like, this is not something that will affect you in 10 years, or your children, or your children's children. This is you today, you now, you in 5 years, you in 10 years. Will you have a pension? Will you have a home? If you're retiring in 5 years' time, will you have a pension? This is what we're talking about. It's not something that's off in the distance. This is our existential moment as a society. So then, if we've gone up to the macro existential level and we're saying, okay, how can we create a reality where in a space of 6 years, 5 years, like we had a time horizon in World War II, we need to tackle climate change, tackle AI in the same kind of urgency, the same kind of time span. So we need to create that political time-based urgency, and basically not accept our politicians giving us a different kind of answer. So if we have all these promises that are made of, well, yeah, we'll do this, and 1.5 or 2 degrees in X number of years, we need to start demanding from politicians through campaigns, through just awareness raising, changing the conversation and making sure that it's clear, no, we need investment now, we need action now, and starting to change how the political discourse is seen, changing the level of ambition. And then you will have a whole bunch of people who say, well, this is not exactly realistic. It's not exactly, it's not realistic for Europe to develop the autonomy that it needs, or to build this and build that. Well, it doesn't matter. It really was not realistic for the US to be producing 60,000 tanks a year. It really wasn't realistic for the US Army to go from 140,000 people to 8 million people, or the entire military going all the way up to 16 million. That none of that was realistic, but they did it anyway. And this is a bit of a false understanding of what realistic even means, because we have this way of confusing realistic as kind of what we, in our current perception, how we think reality should behave. But actually, it's not realistic to have a plan for climate change that goes all the way to 2050, because you just can't predict what will happen until 2050 when you have global heating in a societal and a political environment. That's not realistic. So we just need to shrink these time horizons so that we can actually meet the reality where it is. We cannot pretend like we have the luxury to just kind of stretch out these time horizons. So we need to turn that into part of the political discourse. And in order to do that, to be effective politically, we need to also manage our time habits better and differently. Getting off of all of these social media platforms is a great way to start. Paying attention to your time in your day to day is a great place to start. Removing all of those apps from your phone. Just delete Instagram from your phone. Get off X. You should not, don't just even delete it from your phone. Just delete your account or transfer it to some other platform. Don't have these things around you as much. Yes, you probably will check them every so often, but make sure you check them less. There are apps. There was one that somebody showed me the other day called Freedom that actually blocks off distractions off your phone. So you can set it up so that it actually doesn't let you go on certain apps during the day. And make sure that you start being really discerning around what you let into your brain, and say and prioritize. Okay, I want to spend most of my time thinking about this and this and this, and I will try to avoid watching random YouTube videos about other things, even if those YouTube videos are entertaining and interesting. And so that sort of time management in our personal lives and focus in our personal lives may be coupled with more effective engagement in politics. So engaging with the right kind of campaigns that deal with these very urgent matters. Joining a political party and joining your local political party chapter and saying some of these things to your local political party operatives or civil society operatives, or, running for office, even yourself, and making some of these points. Talking to candidates, writing to your member of parliament and saying, I want more urgent action. You need to talk about this differently. So our actual political engagement on these things can gradually change the narrative. So there is a bit of a collective decluttering that we need to undertake here. One, in our existential level, we need to understand that time is a very, very finite resource on an individual basis and on a societal level. We need to declutter our own personal time horizon and time space in terms of what we let into our brain, getting away from the distraction economy towards more autonomy over our own brains, and refuse to be the product in our own personal lives. And then making sure that we use that newfound time that has been liberated from, TikTok, and liberated from Instagram and all of these places, and using that for meaningful political engagement. Again, writing to your local representative, joining a political party, joining a civil society organization that runs a campaign that you like, or maybe you can set up your own campaign by just writing an email to a civil society organization and saying, hey, look, I have a campaign idea. Can I do it with you? Or, I like this campaign that you're running. What can I do to support it? So these are very good things to do with your time. Now, once again, please support this podcast, This Time Tomorrow. It's about what we really need to be doing to tackle these important points and standing up for freedom and democracy. Please follow us on LinkedIn, on Spotify, on any platform that you're getting this podcast on. Also on Apple Podcasts, write a review. It helps the podcast reach more people. And please take a moment to send the link to the podcast to a group that, on WhatsApp, on Signal, on Facebook, wherever you are. Maybe you can choose 2 people that you can send this podcast to so that they have a listen as well. I hope you enjoyed this monologue format. It went on a while. It took a while. Be glad to get your feedback on whether you think this was a good format, whether it should be shorter, quicker, or whether it was just right as it was. We're always trying to improve this. So thank you very much, and wishing us all a great 2026. Take care.